It's funny how a single moment can redefine everything you thought you knew. I always believed that relationships, even the difficult ones, had a way of working themselves out. If you just communicated enough, if you just tried harder. But that night shattered everything. I'm not one to let my emotions rule me. I've spent most of my life trying to be calm, collected, and, above all, patient. I've always been the guy who would rather walk away from a fight than get involved. But then, there's always that one moment when you realize that you can't keep swallowing everything down. And that moment, the one that turns your life upside down, hit me like a ton of bricks. It all started at that damn wedding rehearsal dinner. The one I never wanted to attend in the first place. It was supposed to be a small gathering. Nothing too flashy, nothing too extravagant. Just a few close friends and family members, a quick dinner, and a rehearsal. But as I stood there in the middle of a crowded room, I began to feel something in my gut that I couldn't shake. I'm not even sure why I went. Maybe I wanted to make my fiancée, Andrea, happy. Or maybe I was just too tired to put up a fight. But when I walked into that venue, something felt wrong. Like a strange energy was hovering in the air, something I couldn't put my finger on. There was too much laughter, too much clinking of glasses. And then there was Andrea, standing at the center of it all, glowing in her little black dress, laughing a little too loudly, looking a little too comfortable. I had never really noticed how much she enjoyed the attention, but that night, it was like I couldn't ignore it anymore. There she was, surrounded by a circle of people, chatting away as if she were the queen of the world, while I stood off to the side, holding a drink in my hand, watching her. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe I was too caught up in my own head, too wrapped up in my own insecurities. I tried to tell myself that it wasn't a big deal, that it wasn't her fault she had a magnetic personality, that I should just relax and enjoy the night. But then, the moment I never expected happened. A group of her friends, people I'd only met a few times, began telling stories, and Andrea, in her usual self-assured manner, joined in. Everyone was laughing, but there was something unsettling about the way she spoke about me. I heard her mention how I was so easy to handle, how I never minded when she made all the decisions, and how I wasn't the type to make waves. And everyone laughed. But for the first time, it wasn't a cute, playful joke. It felt like something else. It felt like they were all in on a joke that I wasn't part of, and I was the punchline. I tried to brush it off, but as the night wore on, the feeling only grew. Her friends, mostly her female friends, started talking about their relationships, and Andrea seemed eager to chip in with her wise advice. She told everyone how I never stood up for myself, how I let her take charge, and how it was actually cute because it showed how much I cared about her. I stood there, frozen, as the room continued to buzz with laughter. I wasn't sure if I should feel humiliated or angry or both. All I knew was that I was starting to feel smaller by the second. This wasn't the woman I thought I was going to marry. This wasn't the person I had spent the last 2 years with. I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. And I wasn't sure what hurt more, the way she spoke about me or the fact that everyone was eating it up. I felt like I was fading into the background, like I wasn't even a real person in that room anymore. Just some quiet accessory to her louder-than-life personality. Then it happened. Someone, one of her friends, Lauren, I think it was, said something that I will never forget. "You're so lucky to have Samir. He never questions you. It's like you can do whatever you want, and he just goes along with it." And Andrea, without missing a beat, laughed and nodded. "Yeah, he's so easygoing. Honestly, sometimes it's like I'm just pushing him around and he's fine with it." That was it. That was the moment everything broke. I felt like the room was closing in on me. The weight of everything she'd said, everything she'd done, suddenly hit me all at once. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. I wasn't some side character in her story. I wasn't some background prop to her grand performance. I excused myself from the group, barely muttering anything as I made my way outside, desperate for air, desperate for some kind of space. I needed to get away. I stood in the cool night air, trying to collect myself, trying to calm the storm in my head. But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. And not just at her, but at myself. At how long I'd let this go on. At how many times I had ignored the signs, dismissed the jokes, convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it seemed. Then it hit me. I couldn't marry her. Not like this. Not with the way she treated me. I realized I wasn't the person she thought I was. I wasn't the quiet guy who didn't mind being pushed around. I had been that guy for too long, and I was done. I didn't go back inside. I didn't care anymore about how it would look. I wasn't going to walk down the aisle for a life that wasn't mine. And that was the moment I knew I had to call it off. I stood there in the cold, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't believe what had just happened. The entire evening had been one big blur of awkward laughter and increasingly sharp remarks. But that one comment, that one careless statement Andrea made, it cut deeper than anything else. It's cute how I can push him around. I couldn't shake those words. They echoed in my head like a broken record. I tried to calm myself, pacing back and forth, breathing in the night air. The crisp chill against my skin should have helped me feel grounded, but instead, it made everything feel even more surreal. I was at a crossroads. Do I go back in there and pretend everything's fine, or do I finally listen to the voice in my head that had been screaming at me for weeks? For weeks, I had felt like I was losing myself. Every decision seemed to be made for me, whether it was where we went on weekends, what we did with our friends, or even what I wore. Andrea had a way of making me feel like everything was my idea, even when it wasn't. But I had been too scared to say anything. Scared of losing her, scared of how much I depended on her, even when I knew it wasn't healthy. But now, standing outside in the dark, I realized something. I didn't want to be that guy anymore. I didn't want to be the guy who just went along with whatever she wanted, who let her make all the decisions without ever standing up for myself. I took a deep breath and made up my mind. I wasn't going back inside. I wasn't going to go through with this wedding. The more I thought about it, the more I felt like I was suffocating. Everything had been about her, her friends, her dreams, her life. What about me? What about my dreams? What about my life? I went back to the car, pulled out my phone, and stared at the screen. I knew I couldn't just walk away quietly. No, I needed to do this right. I needed to call her out. But I wasn't sure if I was ready to face the storm that would come after. My hands were shaking as I typed the message. Lily, I need to talk. I can't do this anymore. Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. The moment I sent it, I felt a wave of relief and dread wash over me simultaneously. I knew I couldn't go back now. There was no going back. I waited, and then my phone buzzed. Where are you? Are you okay? We're just having fun, don't overthink things. I stared at the message for what felt like an eternity. I could feel my anger rising. She didn't even understand what had just happened. She was still caught up in her own world, her own bubble, as if nothing had changed. She thought I was being dramatic, like I always had been. But this wasn't me being dramatic. This was me realizing that I deserved more than to be someone's afterthought. I took one last look at the message and felt the last shred of doubt vanish. I was done. I turned the key in the ignition, the engine roaring to life as I drove away from the venue. I didn't care about the questions, the confusion, or the awkward conversation I was about to have. I had made my decision. I didn't need her to validate me anymore. I didn't need to pretend that I was okay with the way things had been. This wasn't just about a wedding. It was about me standing up for myself for the first time in my life. And as I drove into the night, I couldn't help but feel like I had just crossed an invisible line. There was no going back to the way things were. The hardest part, I realized, was not the actual breakup. It was the part where I finally admitted that I had been settling for a life I didn't want, all because I was too scared to take control. But now, it was too late to turn back. I didn't know where I was going, but I drove, and I kept driving. The more miles I put between myself and that damn rehearsal dinner, the more I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders. The hum of the engine was almost soothing, the only thing that made sense right now. My phone buzzed a few more times, and I didn't even look at it. I knew it was Andrea, but I wasn't ready to face her yet. Not until I understood exactly what was happening inside my head. The truth was, I had been living in denial for a long time. I had ignored all the little signs that something was wrong. The way she'd belittle me in front of her friends, the way I had slowly disappeared into the background of our relationship. I had convinced myself it was just who she was. That maybe I wasn't assertive enough. Maybe I needed to let her be herself. But no more. I pulled over to the side of the road and took a deep breath. This wasn't just about the jokes. This was about respect. About being seen for who I was, not just as some quiet guy who stood by her side while she made all the decisions. I couldn't be that person anymore. I opened my phone, finally looking at the messages. There were a few from Andrea, each one more frantic than the last. Where are you? Everyone's worried. Samir, please, talk to me. I didn't mean it like that. Come on, don't do this. This is stupid. I read the messages with a sense of growing numbness. She still didn't get it. She was worried about the party, about the wedding, about her image. But she wasn't worried about me. Not really. And that realization cut deeper than anything she'd said tonight. I typed out a response, but this time, I didn't hold back. I don't think we should get married. I'm sorry. I stared at the message for a moment, almost second-guessing myself. Was I really ready to end everything? To throw away years of my life with her? But then I thought back to the dinner. The jokes. The way she laughed at my expense. And in that moment, I knew it wasn't just about a simple disagreement. It was about who we were as people. And it wasn't working. I sent the message. My thumb hovered over the screen for a few seconds before I locked my phone and leaned back in the driver's seat, feeling the weight of it all settle in. There was no going back. I stared at the screen of my phone for a few more seconds, as if expecting some kind of miracle. Maybe Andrea would call and beg me to come back. Maybe she would understand. Maybe she would apologize, explain that it was just a moment of bad judgment, and everything would be fine. But deep down, I knew that wasn't going to happen. The phone buzzed again, and for a split second, I hesitated. But then I looked at the message preview and saw her name pop up. Samir, please, don't do this. I love you. Her words felt hollow. They didn't feel real, not after everything that had happened tonight. I had spent so much time convincing myself that I could live with the way things were, that I could handle it. But now, it felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, staring into an abyss. I tried to calm myself down, but the anger was still there, burning in my chest. It wasn't just about what had happened that night. It was the way I had let it go on for so long. I had been weak. I had allowed her to push me into a box, and now, I was finally breaking free. But then, another message from her pinged through. Samir, don't you remember how good we are together? All the good times, the love. I've been patient with you. Don't throw it all away. I felt a sickening pang in my stomach. Good times? Had she really just said that? All I could think about was how she had belittled me in front of everyone, how she treated me like an afterthought when it came to important decisions. And yet, here she was, painting a picture of something that wasn't real, something she wanted me to believe. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending like I was happy, like I was okay with being treated like a second-class citizen in my own relationship. But the storm wasn't over. I felt my phone vibrating in my hand again. Andrea was calling now. I knew this conversation was coming, but I wasn't ready for it. I didn't want to have the long, drawn-out argument about how I was overreacting or how this wasn't a big deal. I let it ring, refusing to pick up. This wasn't something we could fix with a phone call. Not this time. As the minutes passed, I could feel my emotions shifting from anger to numbness. This had been coming for a long time, but I had been blind to it. I had ignored my gut telling me that something wasn't right. I kept convincing myself it would get better, that I just had to wait it out. But now, I realized how foolish that was. I reached for the steering wheel, gripping it tightly as I started the car again. My mind raced as I drove through the quiet streets, passing familiar landmarks that had once felt like home. But now, everything felt different. The world had changed, and so had I. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I wasn't turning back. I couldn't. I just needed to get away. I drove for what felt like hours, the familiar streets of my town slowly becoming unfamiliar as I pushed further away. My mind kept replaying everything. Her laugh, her dismissive tone, the way she had humiliated me. But it wasn't just that. It was how I had let it happen, how I had let myself become invisible in my own life. I pulled over to the side of the road again, the engine idling in the dark. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of it all crash down on me. The wedding, the life we were supposed to have, it was all slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling through the messages one last time. I could see Andrea's desperation in her texts. Please, Samir, just talk to me. I love you. You're all I want. It wasn't enough. Not anymore. I wiped the tears that had started to form in my eyes, but I didn't feel sadness. I felt relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was taking control of my life. I knew there was no going back, no undoing the damage. The wedding, the plans, the life I thought I wanted, it was all gone. And maybe that was for the best. But even so, as I sat there, staring at the empty road ahead of me, I couldn't help but wonder how I had let things get this far. How had I let myself become so small in someone else's world? The storm was just beginning, and I wasn't sure what was going to happen next. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I might finally be able to breathe. I sat in my car for a while, letting the quiet of the night settle in around me. The world felt different now, as if something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't sure whether I was relieved or terrified, but I knew one thing. I was done pretending. The hardest part was over, but the consequences were still looming. I pulled myself together enough to get out of the car. I was on the outskirts of town now, far away from the noise of the party, the chaos of the wedding preparations. I stood there for a moment, looking at the dark road stretching out before me. I wasn't ready to go back. I couldn't face Andrea, not yet. Not after everything that had happened. My phone buzzed again. Another message from her. I'm coming to find you. I don't care if you're angry, Samir. I need to talk to you. I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a wave of dread wash over me. Andrea wasn't one to chase after anyone. She was confident, always in control. But now she was panicked, and I realized just how far gone we were. I wasn't angry anymore, though. I was just empty. There was no point in pretending to be someone I wasn't. The things she'd said, the way she'd dismissed me, it had broken something inside me that I couldn't fix. Not by apologizing, not by going back to what we were. I got back into the car and started driving again, the headlights cutting through the dark. I didn't know where I was going, but I didn't want to be anywhere near her right now. I needed space, time to think. But the more I drove, the more I felt the pull of the past. The memories. The good times. I couldn't deny them, no matter how much I wanted to. There had been moments when I was truly happy with her. Moments where I felt like we were a team. But those moments felt like they belonged to someone else, to a version of me that no longer existed. I pulled into a small parking lot by a lake, my mind still racing. I stepped out and walked toward the water, the cool breeze brushing against my face. The sound of the waves lapping against the shore was the only thing that grounded me in that moment. I could feel the tears welling up, but I didn't let them fall. I wasn't going to cry over something that was already over. I had to keep moving forward, even if I had no idea what that looked like. I pulled my phone out again, staring at the screen for a long moment. I had to end this now, before it dragged on any longer. Before we both pretended we were something we weren't. I typed a message, my fingers trembling slightly as I wrote. I don't want this anymore, Andrea. We're done. It wasn't easy to send, but I knew it was the right thing to do. The message sent, and I stared at the screen, waiting for a response. My heart was heavy, but the weight felt different now. It wasn't the weight of a mistake, it was the weight of clarity. I stood there by the lake, my phone still in my hand, staring at the screen like it held all the answers. The silence was deafening, and for a moment, I thought maybe it would be better to just turn it off, to walk away and forget all of this ever happened. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. I couldn't go back to pretending. A few minutes passed before the phone buzzed again. Andrea. My stomach tightened, and I took a deep breath, bracing myself for whatever was coming next. I opened the message. How could you do this to me? I don't understand. What do you want from me? I stared at the words, her confusion almost palpable through the screen. She didn't get it. She didn't get me. And that was the problem all along. I had spent so much of our relationship trying to make her happy, trying to be the guy she wanted me to be, that I had lost myself in the process. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad anymore. I just felt empty. I typed a response, but this time it wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. I took my time, letting the words sink in before I hit send. I want someone who sees me, who respects me. I've been invisible for too long. The phone buzzed almost instantly. I wasn't prepared for what I read next. You don't mean that. You're just upset. You've always been so passive, Samir. You don't know how to fight for anything. I read those words and felt my jaw tighten. Passive. She had the nerve to call me passive, when all I had ever done was try to make things work, try to keep the peace, try to ignore the growing feeling that something was wrong. It was like she had no idea who I really was. I had let her define me, let her dictate the pace of everything. The truth was, I didn't know who I was anymore, not in this relationship. And that was the hardest part to admit. I walked back to the car, still holding my phone. I thought about calling her, about maybe talking things through, but I knew better now. She wasn't going to change in that moment. She wasn't going to suddenly understand. This wasn't a fight we could fix with words or apologies. This was something deeper, something that had been festering for too long. I drove back into town, my thoughts swirling in every direction. I thought about our future, what it could have been, what it should have been. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to be. Not with her. Not with the version of her that had become so self-absorbed, so blind to everything that mattered. When I got home, I felt strangely calm, like I had just walked away from a bad dream. The house was quiet, and I found myself standing in the middle of the living room, just thinking. I heard the sound of my phone buzzing again, and I didn't even look at it this time. I knew it was her. I could feel the weight of everything she was going to say next. But for the first time, I didn't care. I had made my decision. And this time, I wasn't backing down. The next few hours felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the weight of the message I'd sent, the finality of it. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the end of who I thought I was. I had never seen myself as the kind of person who could just walk away from something, anything, without looking back. But here I was, standing in my living room, staring at the phone, unable to stop the whirlwind inside my head. I heard the familiar ping of another message from Andrea. I couldn't bring myself to read it right away. Instead, I stared at the screen, willing myself to ignore the temptation. But eventually, I opened it. I'm outside. My heart skipped a beat. She was here. I froze, the room suddenly feeling smaller. I had no idea what I was supposed to feel. Panic? Regret? Anger? But instead, I felt an eerie sense of calm. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to back down now. I grabbed my jacket and walked to the door, my hands clammy as I turned the handle. When I opened it, I wasn't sure what I expected, an apology, perhaps, or a desperate plea to take her back. But what I saw was something else entirely. Andrea stood there, her face pale, eyes wide. Her hands trembled as she held them in front of her, almost like she was trying to protect herself. The sight of her made my chest tighten, but not in the way I had expected. "Samir," she started, her voice barely above a whisper, "please. I don't understand. What happened? We were fine, weren't we? We were supposed to get married. This isn't how it was supposed to be." I just stood there, taking in her words, each one falling like heavy stones around me. She sounded so small, so lost. But I wasn't lost anymore. Not like she was. "No, Andrea," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "We weren't fine. We never were. Not really." Her face faltered, and for a second, I thought she was going to break down right there. She took a step forward, but I stepped back, my hands gripping the doorframe. You're just going to throw everything away?" she whispered, disbelief in her eyes. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. The truth was that everything between us had been slipping away for a long time. The jokes, the dismissiveness, the way she controlled every decision, every move I made, it had worn me down. But I hadn't been strong enough to say anything until now. "I can't be with someone who doesn't see me, Andrea," I said finally. "I can't keep pretending that this is okay when it's not. I don't even know who I am anymore in this relationship." She looked at me like I had just slapped her. Her eyes were wide, her lips parted in shock. But this wasn't just a shock for her. It was a shock for me, too. I had never imagined I would have to say those words. I had never thought I'd find myself here, with everything unraveling right in front of me. "Don't do this," she said, stepping closer again, but I stood my ground. "We can fix this. I can change. Just give me another chance. Please." I felt a pang of sadness at her words. I had wanted to believe that too, that things could change, that things could get better. But deep down, I knew it wasn't true. I had given her chances. I had given so many chances, but nothing ever changed. It wasn't about change anymore. It was about respect. I shook my head. "No, I'm sorry, but I can't. I'm done." Her face twisted with a mix of confusion and hurt. I saw her fighting to hold back tears, but I couldn't let myself feel sorry for her. Not anymore. This wasn't about her. It was about me taking back control of my life. She stood there for a long time, staring at me, as if trying to find a way to change my mind. But I knew there was nothing left to say. Finally, she turned and walked away, her steps heavy against the pavement. I watched her go, feeling something inside me twist. But it wasn't guilt. It was the realization that I was free. I closed the door softly behind me, leaning against it for a moment, trying to steady my breath. The weight of the situation was still there, but it wasn't as suffocating as before. I had made my choice. I had taken control. And no matter how painful it was, I knew it was the right thing to do. The consequences were still unclear. I didn't know what would happen next, what kind of fallout I'd face, or how long it would take for me to fully heal from this. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally start living for myself. The door clicked softly behind me, and the silence that followed felt almost overwhelming. I stood there for a moment, not knowing what to feel. There was no anger, no sadness, just a strange sense of finality. Andrea had gone, and with her, everything I had been holding on to. But I didn't feel the weight of regret that I thought I would. Instead, I felt something else, a quiet sense of relief. I had taken control of my life again. I had made a decision, a difficult one, but one I knew was right. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet, no longer shadowed by someone else's expectations. As the hours passed, I found myself thinking about the future. It was hard to imagine what that future would look like, but one thing was clear, it was mine to shape now. I wasn't sure what my next steps were, but I didn't need to know. I wasn't in a rush anymore. The next few weeks were a blur of change. I spent time rediscovering parts of myself that I had forgotten. I picked up hobbies I hadn't touched in years. I started reading again, going for long walks, and catching up with old friends. I even traveled to a few places I had always wanted to see. It wasn't about moving on, it was about moving forward. For the first time, I was doing things for me. And then, one evening, I ran into someone. Her name was Nadia, a fellow book lover I had met at a local cafe a while back. We had exchanged a few friendly words back then, but that night, we ended up talking for hours. It was casual at first, just light conversation about our favorite books and life in general. But there was something about her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about the things that mattered to her, that made me feel like I was finally meeting someone who saw me, really saw me. We started seeing each other more often, not rushing anything, just enjoying each other's company. It felt different from anything I'd experienced before. There was no pressure, no pretending to be someone I wasn't. With Nadia, I felt like I could be myself, fully and unapologetically. As months went by, I realized that I had found something I hadn't even known I was looking for, a real connection, not built on expectations, but on mutual respect and understanding. In the end, I understood what had been missing in my life. It wasn't about being in a relationship for the sake of it or being with someone who needed to change. It was about being with someone who allowed you to be your true self, someone who respected you as you were, not someone you had to convince to see your worth. And as I looked at the life I was building, the life that I was finally in control of, I realized something else, that the best part of this journey wasn't the end of my relationship with Andrea, but the beginning of my own path. It was the first step toward rediscovering myself, and it was something I wouldn't trade for anything. For the first time, I was truly free. And that felt like the greatest gift of all.